everyone, my name's Amy Metz, and the event that I researched was the Tour de France. So for some history of the event originated in France, and the first race was held on July 1st, 1903. 60 men from France, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, and Italy all came together to kick the race off, and the race actually awarded 20,000 francs in prize money. So it was originally developed by Henry de Grange, director and editor of a French local newspaper, and it was designed as a 1,500-mile clockwise loop of France, and it was set up in 6 stages at an average of 250 miles each, so it was definitely a very challenging course that required a lot of strength. And just some characteristics of the ride that are kind of different from what today's Tour de France looks like. The riders were riding on unpaved roads without helmets. They rode as individuals and not team members, and they didn't have support cars, and they often had to ride through the night in order to make up time, so the only light that they had to kind of guide them was the moon. So they were also responsible for making their own repairs, so it was definitely very individualized as an event. It's not a team sport like it is today. And only 21 of the 60 riders actually ended up completing the first tour. Maurice Garin won. He was wearing a green armband to signify race leadership, and this kind of evolved into today they wear yellow jerseys to signify that they have the lowest cumulative time in each stage. There were 20,000 spectators cheering at the finish line, so this was actually a lot for this time period. A lot of people were pretty interested in this event. And then cheating and disqualification has been present since the very first race, so this just means people would take illegal advantages, so they would hop into cars and drive through the night just to get closer to the finish line, and then just doping and other things that are kind of seen in the sport. So the event today is France's premier annual sporting event, and it has deep cultural roots in France. It is a men's bicycle race, and it's the world's most prestigious and most difficult bicycle race, and it's designed as a 21-stage cycling race that lasts for over 2,000 miles, and it's based on time trial racing, so each of the stages is timed. Riders will also have to, go through flat land and stretches of mountainous incline, so there's a lot of variety within the stages. And there are 22 professional teams made up of 8 riders each, and while the riders are riding independent, there's a lot of focus placed on selfless actions of team members to be able to help the team's leader. So instead of wanting to catch up with your team leader, if they're ahead of you, you would focus more on beating out the competitors that are closest to you so they don't catch up with your team's leader. And another thing is that sponsors have evolved from being mainly bicycle manufacturers to include banks, insurance companies, and other large corporations. So, women in the event. So the Tour de France Féminine was a sort of a comparable event that lasted for 5 years from 1984, and women were able to race a portion of the stages that were held in the actual Tour de France, but this had very diminished success due to the little investment that was placed in, building an event like this for women. So the picture off in the right corner, this is actually a Canadian team who were able to race in the very first Tour de France Féminine, this was just a really commemorable moment for a lot of female bikers. However, the diminished success, the event only lasted for 5 years, so it kind of died out. And now women are actually able to race the stage of the Tour de France a day before the men's race. So there still isn't a women's equivalent race, and because of that, there's a lot of controversy surrounding sexism within the sport, just because of the limited opportunities that women have to be able to compete at this prestigious level. So some governing bodies related to the Tour de France, the Union Cycliste Internationale is the world governing body for cycling, and it oversees all international events and enforces disciplinary rules. So some of the rules include matters of doping. For example, Lance Armstrong was actually stripped of all 7 of his wins because of it uncovering his use of performance-enhancing drugs. So the UCI was very involved in this decision-making and stepping in to kind of correct any wrongs that riders have kind of made in correcting them. So they took away his wins. And so they also enforce other illegal advantages that may be taken. So for example, like I mentioned, people would sort of hitch rides in the middle of the night, or like accept food or things from people they were unauthorized to. So they would deal with situations like that too. And the Armory Sport Organization is actually the organization that's responsible for organizing the entire Tour de France. So they have the most close interaction with the event. So the event is held yearly. The only years that it wasn't held was during the World Wars, and it's staged for 3 weeks in each July, and it's mainly held in France, where there's also occasional visits through surrounding countries like Belgium, Italy, Germany, and Spain. And the starting points in the villages that the race passes through often fluctuate depending on the year and if the race, changes its course at all. So as you can see on this side, there's a map of the Tour de France in 2017. And so it starts outside of France and it kind of makes its way in and all the way around the country. So it's a very long race, and it covers like the entire expanse of France basically. So the size and scope of the event, just to show kind of how it's grown throughout the years, in 1903, the participation rates were 60 riders, and then that grew to 176 in 2018. So, like I mentioned previously, the teams are made up of, there's 22 teams and they're made up of 8 riders, so this would be 176 riders, and this has kind of been consistent throughout the year, so it's not that they're trying to get more participants. It's not like a goal of the race. It's more of like a team, competition that, they invite so many teams to. And then, as for spectators, in 1903, there was about 20,000 spectators standing along the route to cheer, and then there was 11 million spectators in 2018. So the amount of exposure and importance has kind of grown a lot throughout the years as more people are becoming interested in watching it and interested in supporting it. So looking at the media, in 1903, the event info was mainly released through newspaper and word of mouth. And then in 2018, there were 60 TV channels with live coverage and 90 TV radio commentators. So even through the media, this event has expanded globally a lot. And then as for prize amounts, this is another area where there's been a lot of growth. So in 1903, the 20,000 francs, equaling about 80,000 euros awarded in prize money, grew to over 2 million euros in 2018. So the event has definitely grown in size throughout the years, and it's a very important part to French culture, and it's very popular even among all over the world. So the profile of the event participants and the spectators. The riders often will return to the event from previous years. So successful cyclists will see this event as the ultimate test of strength. So they're going to want to compete in it for as long as they can. And this is also seen, a lot of the riders will actually win multiple times. So there's been about 5 riders that have won the Tour de France 5 times themselves. So there's a lot of repeat riders and people who want to keep returning to the event just because this is their stage to be able to compete on. And the riders are also physically fit. They're very powerful athletes. In order to bike 2,000 miles, it really requires physical strength. And the riders are also very committed to the sport. So they'll usually invest in about 3 types of bikes, one for time trials, one for flat road racing, and then a very lightweight bike for the mountain climbing portions. And then, so looking at the spectators, they often become very engaged in the challenging portions of the race, just because, people like to see the challenges that they're facing in the hard courses and lead people through those. And the spectators can also enjoy the race for free, so many come and they set up folding chairs, umbrellas, food, and they kind of make like a picnic and a day out of it. So that's a very unique part, is that people don't have to pay to attend the race and cheer people along the sidelines. And the spectators are all mainly local. Only 20% of them are from outside of France. So looking at media coverage, the event is televised globally. It's, a supreme test of athletic endurance, and it's very popular all over the world. 190 countries broadcasted the race, and over 35 million TV viewers on the French national channel. And then the race also has 7.5 million fans on social networks. So the official broadcasters of the race are France TV Sport and Eurovision, and the official media partners are Le Parisien, France Info, and France Bleu. And their last year's race had 500 media organizations from 45 nationalities present. So it's definitely a very highly publicized event. A lot of racers gain publicity through this, and because of this, there are also many sponsors to the event. So the sponsorship, kind of like I mentioned, has evolved from being just bicycle manufacturers into being like banks and insurance companies and other large national corporations. So there's kind of a mixture of like French local sponsors and then the international sponsors. So the 5 main partners of the event are LCL, Skoda, Leclerc, Chris, and Continental EN, and I put a couple of their logos off to the side here. And then the race has 10 official partners, including Latel, Orange, Century 21, and more. The race has 14 official suppliers, including Bic, Yamaha, Bostik, and more, and then 2 official supporters, Haribo and Extra, and 5 technical partners, Doublet, XPO Logistics, DNP, and more, and then 5 institutional partners, including AMF, the Departments of France, and more. So here are my references. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments.